Once upon a time, in a small town, there lived a young merchant named Ananda. Ananda was ambitious, hard-working, and full of dreams. He wanted to build a business that would make him wealthy, respected, and powerful. He had seen how some merchants in his town had grown rich by any means necessary, often cutting corners, exploiting workers, and deceiving customers. Ananda thought that to be successful, he too would have to follow their ways. However, there was a part of Ananda that felt uneasy about this approach. He had grown up listening to stories of the Buddha and was deeply influenced by Buddhist teachings. He knew that greed and dishonesty led to suffering, but the attraction of wealth and success was strong. Torn between his ambitions and his ethics, Ananda decided to seek advice from an old monk who lived on the outskirts of the town. The monk, known as Bhante, was admired by everyone for his wisdom and compassion. People would often go to him for guidance on various matters of life. One day, Ananda gathered the courage to visit Bhante at his humble residence. When he arrived, he found the monk sitting quietly under a tree, meditating. Ananda hesitated, not wanting to disturb him, but Bhante sensed his presence and opened his eyes with a gentle smile. "Welcome, young merchant," Bhante said softly. "What brings you here?" Ananda bowed respectfully and replied, "Master, I am conflicted. I want to be successful in my business, but I do not want to lost from the path of morality. I see others becoming rich through dishonest means, and I fear that if I don't do the same, I will fail. How can I achieve success without compromising my values?" Bhante listened patiently and then nodded. "Ananda, I understand your dilemma. The path of business is often filled with challenges, but it is possible to walk this path with honesty. Let me tell you a story." Ananda sat down, eager to hear the monk's tale. "Many years ago," Bhante began, "there was a young merchant like you named Sudama. He was intelligent, resourceful, and driven by a desire to succeed. Sudama wanted to become the greatest merchant in the land, but he was also deeply committed to the teachings of the Buddha. He knew that success achieved at the cost of others' well-being was hollow and would lead to suffering, both for himself and others. Sudama faced many of the same challenges that you face today. His competitors used unfair practices to get ahead, and there were times when Sudama was tempted to do the same. But he remembered the words of the Buddha, "Right livelihood is one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. To live ethically is to live in harmony with yourself and others." So, Sudama made a promise to conduct his business with honesty, compassion, and mindfulness. He would not exploit his workers, cheat his customers, or harm the environment. Instead, he would focus on providing true value, building trust, and creating a business that benefited everyone involved. At first, Sudama's approach seemed slow. His profits were modest, and some of his competitors mocked him for being too soft to succeed in the harsh world of commerce. But Sudama was patient and persistent. He treated his employees fairly, paying them a living salary and ensuring they worked in safe, comfortable conditions. He built strong relationships with his customers, always delivering what he promised and standing by the quality of his goods. Over time, word spread about Sudama's ethical practices. People began to prefer doing business with him, knowing they could trust him. His employees, motivated by his fairness and kindness, worked harder and more efficiently. His customers remained loyal and recommended him to others. Slowly but surely, Sudama's business grew. Sudama understood the principle of right intention, another step on the Noble Eightfold Path. He was not driven by greed or the desire to beat his competitors, but by the intention to create value and serve his community. He knew that true success was not measured by the amount of wealth he accumulated, but by the positive impact he had on others. One day, a devastating flood hit the town where Sudama lived. Many businesses were destroyed, and people lost their homes and livelihoods. Sudama's warehouse filled with goods was spared by the flood, but instead of hoarding his supplies to sell at higher prices, he decided to help those in need. He distributed food, clothing, and other essentials to the affected families, asking for nothing in return. The people were deeply touched by Sudama's generosity. His actions inspired others to help as well, and together they rebuilt the town. People respected him not just as a merchant, but as a leader and a friend. Sudama's competitors, who had once mocked him, began to see the value in his approach. Some of them changed their ways, realizing that ethical business practices could lead to long-term success. Sudama had not only built a successful business, but had also created a legacy of integrity, compassion, and trust. Bhante paused and looked at Ananda. "Do you see, young merchant, how Sudama's commitment to Buddhist principles guided him to success? He did not chase after wealth for its own sake. Instead, he focused on creating value, serving others, and living in harmony with the world around him. His success was not just in material wealth, but in the respect, love, and trust he earned from his community." Ananda nodded, deeply moved by the story. "But Master," he asked, "what if the challenges I face are too great? What if I lose everything because I choose to do the right thing?" Bhante smiled kindly. "Ananda, the path of ethical entrepreneurship is not without challenges. There will be times when you face losses, setbacks, and even failures. But remember this, true wealth is not in gold or possessions, but in the peace of mind that comes from living in accordance with your values. Even if you lose everything, you will have the satisfaction of knowing that you did what was right. And that, my young friend, is worth more than all the riches in the world." Ananda reflected on the monk's words. He realized that the fear of failure had been holding him back, but now he understood that real success lay in positioning his business with his values. He thanked Bhante for his wisdom and promised to follow the path of ethical entrepreneurship. With renewed determination, Ananda returned to his business. He began implementing the principles he had learned from Bhante and the story of Sudama. He treated his workers fairly, paid them well, and ensured their working conditions were safe and comfortable. He was honest with his customers, always delivering what he promised and standing by the quality of his products. Ananda also made a conscious effort to minimize the environmental impact of his business. He sourced materials sustainably and reduced waste wherever possible. He even set aside a portion of his profits to support local community projects. Understanding that his success was deeply connected to the well-being of those around him. At first, the changes Ananda made were not easy. Some of his competitors continued to undercut him with cheaper, lower-quality goods. There were times when Ananda questioned his choices, especially when profits were lower than expected. But he remembered Bhante's words and the story of Sudama, and he stayed the course. As time passed, Ananda's business began to thrive. His employees were more motivated and productive, knowing they were valued and respected. His customers appreciated his honesty and the quality of his products, and they remained loyal even when cheaper options were available. Ananda's reputation as an ethical businessman grew, and soon people from other towns began seeking him out. One day, a wealthy investor approached Ananda with a proposal to expand his business significantly. The investor was impressed by Ananda's reputation and wanted to partner with him to create a larger enterprise. However, the investor made it clear that certain compromises would need to be made, cutting costs by lowering wages, using cheaper materials, and increasing prices for customers. Ananda was tempted. The offer was profitable, and it would make him wealthier than he had ever imagined. But he also knew that accepting the offer would mean abandoning the principles that had guided him so far. He thought of Bhante and the story of Sudama. He realized that true success was not just about wealth, but about staying true to his values. Ananda politely declined the investor's offer, explaining that he could not compromise on his principles. The investor was surprised and even a little disappointed, but he respected Ananda's decision. Word of Ananda's integrity spread even further, and it only strengthened his business. As the years went by, Ananda's business continued to grow. He expanded, but he did so in a way that remained true to his values. He opened new branches, created jobs, and contributed to the well-being of his community. Ananda's business became a model for others, and many young entrepreneurs came to him for advice on how to succeed without compromising their ethics. Ananda also continued to seek guidance from Bhante, who remained a source of wisdom and inspiration. Bhante would often remind Ananda that the true measure of his success was not in the wealth he had accumulated, but in the positive impact he had on others. And so Ananda's story became an inspiration for others. It showed that ethical entrepreneurship is not just a dream, but a reality that can be achieved by anyone willing to walk the path of integrity, compassion, and mindfulness. Ananda had unlocked the secret to true success, not by following the ways of the world, but by staying true to the principles that had guided him from the beginning. And that is the story of Ananda, the merchant who chose the path of ethical entrepreneurship. May it inspire you to follow your own path with integrity, compassion, and mindfulness, knowing that true success comes not from wealth, but from living a life of purpose and values.